Hello, and welcome all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 49th episode, our target is Brave, produced by Pixar Animation Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. With the title of The Bear and the Bow, the film was first announced in April of 2008 alongside Up and Cars 2. The original title for the film, The Bear and the Bow, would later be given to an episode of Once Upon a Time in an episode which featured some of the characters from this film. Brenda Chapman, who conceived the project, became Pixar's first female director of a feature-length film. However, in October of 2010, she was replaced by Mark Andrews after creative disagreements with John Lasseter. Though she found the news to be devastating, she would go on to say that, quote, vision came through in the film, and, quote, very proud of the movie, and that I ultimately stood up for myself. Years later, she would claim that it was bittersweet, but it opened more doors for her. The new director, Mark Andrews, said, quote, the bones of the film were totally fine. That was not the issue. What was hanging off the bones, there were the problems. They were the things that were not working. The focuses and balances that were out of whack. End quote. Reese Witherspoon was originally cast to play the lead, however she ultimately was replaced by Scottish actress Kelly MacDonald. The reason for her recasting was either due to other projects lining up or a failure to master a Scottish accent, or perhaps a bit of both. The film was dedicated to Pixar chairman Steve Jobs, who died before the film's release. The film was going to release in the holiday of 2011, but was moved up to June 15, 2012, and finally to June 22, 2012. The film made $538 million on a budget of $185 million. The film was directed by Mark Andrews and Brenda Chapman, and the story was by Brenda Chapman. The screenplay was by Mark Andrews, Steve Purcell, Brenda Chapman, and Irene Mecchi. It was produced by Catherine Serafian, edited by Nicholas C. Smith, and the music was by Patrick Doyle. The camera cinematographer was Robert Anderson, and the lighting cinematographer was Danielle Feinberg. The cast includes Kelly MacDonald, Emma Thompson, Billy Connolly, Julie Walters, Robbie Coltrane, Kevin McKidd, Craig Ferguson, Steve Purcell, Patrick Doyle, John Ratzenberger, Sally Kinghorn, Elid Frazier, Stephen Cree, Calliam O'Neill, and Peggy Barker. The film was nominated for 39 awards as listed by Wikipedia, of which it won 13 of. It became Pixar's 13th film after 2011's Cars and before 2013's Monsters University. The film opens with a look at the past, where we see a young Merida, princess of the clan Dunbroch, celebrating her birthday and being given a bow by her father, much to the dismay of her mother. Chasing an arrow, Merida encounters will-o-wisps that lead her back to her family. Just then, a huge bear named Mor'du attacks, with her father, Fergus, fending it off, but losing his leg in the process. Now in the present day, Merida is to be married to the eldest son of one of the three clans, much to Merida's disliking. After deciding to compete for her own hand and easily winning the competition, Merida's mother, Elinor, becomes furious with her and burns her bow, but saves it before it is destroyed. Merida runs away into the forest, only to see the wisps again, this time leading her to the hut of an old wood carver, who Merida eventually finds out to be a witch. When Merida agrees to buy her whole stock of wood carvings, the witch agrees to make Merida a spell that will change her mother, as Merida says. When Elinor eats the cake, she turns into a bear, not able to speak, but keeping consciousness. Merida helps her flee the castle as they go to the witch's hut, only to find that she has left and won't return till spring. However, she left a message for them, warning that the spell will be permanent after the second sunrise, but that it can be broken by mending the bond. The wisps then lead the two to a ruined castle, where they find Mor'du, and learn that he was the eldest son in a story that we heard previously from both Elinor and the witch. After the close encounter, Merida concludes that she must fix the tapestry that was damaged during the argument with Elinor. The following day, they return to the castle, finding that the four clans at each other's throats. Merida eases tensions when she speaks to them all, with guiding from her mother, re-establishing peace between the clans and breaking the tradition of their current ways of marriage. When Elinor suddenly loses consciousness, Fergus and the clans chase her into the woods, with Merida being locked away after sounding crazy. With the help of her younger triplet brothers, who similarly ate the cake and became bears, Merida escapes and brings the tapestry to the woods where Mor'du suddenly attacks. The clans, Merida and Elinor, fight them, ending with Mor'du being crushed by a big rock and his soul being freed. The tapestry is fixed, and Elinor and the brothers are returned to humans. Let us start by talking about the protagonist, Merida, and the central conflict with her mother. This is an interesting one for me to talk about because I really don't know where to start. This central conflict is really just very strange and poorly executed at many points. It starts out fine enough, if not pretty cliche, with Merida being resistant to being married to someone she's never met, which, is understandable. The plot starts to get more interesting when Merida chooses archery as the event that must be won to win her hand in marriage, only for Merida to compete, claiming that since she's the eldest child of her clan, she has a right to compete. This causes turmoil between the clans and, more importantly to the plot, between Merida and Elinor. Merida runs off and finds a witch's hut where the film returns to being generic when the witch's spell doesn't turn out as expected because Merida requests something incredibly vague and not clear at all. From there, the second act is really poorly paced. What should be the time for bonding between the two and maintaining the urgency of the spell's permanence after the second sunrise. However, this first day is instead wasted on a fishing sequence that really doesn't teach or develop much of anything, and it also wastes the entire first day, so now we've got to rush through the rest. Compare this to another Pixar film, 2020's Onward, and the distinction is clear. The second act of that film contains not only a lot of creative scenes that makes use of the magical elements, but also a lot of bonding scenes between the two main characters that really allows for that gut punch ending. Brave, however, wastes time with the fishing sequence that really doesn't accomplish much of anything. It's not a scene that makes use of the magical elements or the medieval Scotland setting. It also doesn't develop Merida or Elinor. Nothing really comes of this. The building blocks are there, with Merida wanting Elinor to listen, and now with the spell, Elinor has no choice but to listen, but the film never does anything with that. There is the scene where Merida reunites the clans, and this scene is pretty good in a vacuum, but ultimately wasn't an earned moment with any build-up. The finale where the spell is broken is similarly left without much build-up, leading to an unsatisfying payoff. Overall, this central story is strange, and the potential, while there, is pretty hard to see, with a lot of scenes not really connecting to one another, and seeming to go in another direction. What's more is that neither Merida or Elinor are entertaining characters. The only thing that they have going for them is the main plot, which really isn't well developed. Now, let's talk about my favorite part of the movie, despite still being full of flaws, the clans. Merida's dad, Fergus, is the one thing in this film that's actually good. His character is pretty funny, and the entertainment value from him is superior to anything else in the film. He doesn't have a whole lot of screen time, which is unfortunate because it really would have made the whole film more bearable, pun intended. The other clans, while not as consistent, still offer a similar feeling as Fergus, and their interactions are all pretty good. I will admit the goofy nature of these characters kill any real threat of a war that the main plot kind of depends upon, but honestly, with the way the film already killed the tension, this is a nice alternative. In a perfect world, these characters wouldn't behave this way, and the threat of an actual war rising due to Merida's actions would further fuel the main conflict between her and Elinor. At the end of the day, though, these characters offer the greatest positive in the film, even if it's still pretty lackluster. I do want to quickly note, however, that the setting and tone of the background is really great. Both in the animation and the music, the setting of a medieval Scotland are really unique to anything else in the Pixar catalog, I'd argue, which is another net positive for the film, even if it can't save the main story. Finally, let's talk about the central villain, Mor'du. Mor'du is really interesting to talk about because he has a really cool design and backstory, and he's the only thing where the tension is actually there. In the world of animation where bears are a lot more goofy and whatnot, even in this very film, Mor'du makes full use of the fact that bears are really terrifying creatures with a lot of potential for danger. Add the fact that this is an enlarged bear with the spirit of an angry prince, and you've got a pretty scary villain. Speaking of which, the backstory for him is pretty cool. The setup for it, while quite forced, is still an attempt at foreshadowing that I can appreciate. My one complaint is that I wish he was in the film more, because while he makes for a cool set piece, his role as the villain is pretty bad, as he just randomly shows up to create chaos. The final fight against him is kind of cool, with everyone having to team up to kill him, but this too is ruined by the fact that he's just killed by a big rock. All these people fighting him and he's just crushed. That's it. He's dead now. A very disappointing death for what was otherwise a pretty cool looking villain. I have a similar issue with him as I do everything else so far, and that is that he doesn't serve to the central narrative at all. But I can still appreciate the good things that were done with him. I give Brave a 4 out of 10 for being a pretty mediocre film. This film was a real shock to the system, as this was arguably Pixar's first bad film, with the possible exception of Cars 2, which released just before this. As I've mentioned, the building blocks are there, but they're not stacked in a compelling way at all. If I had to guess, I would say that the shift in directors is what really hurt this movie the most. It really does feel like two different stories molded together. At the end of the day, though, all I know for certain is that this film leaves a lot to be desired, and really could have used with more substance. This is an interesting film to look back on, history-wise, because it was really around the time Pixar began to lose its footing and its stance as the gold standard of animation. Coming into the new decade after 10 years of tear-jerking masterpieces, a strange new reputation was beginning for Pixar. Well, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to share any opinions you had on the movie. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.